Where in your life and in your work are you saying yes when your soul is really screaming no? Do you find yourself over delivering, undercharging, and feeling quietly resentful, all in the name of being helpful, kind, or professional? If that hits a nerve, today's episode is for you. I'm getting real about one of the most common and costly challenges we as spiritually inclined women entrepreneurs face: people pleasing, and the life changing power of becoming more adept at setting sacred boundaries in your business. I'm starting out with a story about one of the most challenging boundaries I've ever had to hold with a client. It tested so many parts of me and ultimately reshaped how I lead, serve, and protect what matters most. So here's what we'll unpack: the hidden parts of you that drive people pleasing and why it's not your fault, the spiritual, emotional, and financial cost of loose boundaries, and how to reframe boundaries as sacred, soul honoring commitments rather than rigid rules. So let's be clear, this is not about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about becoming clear so your genius can flow freely, your clients can feel safe, and your business becomes a space of deep integrity and alignment. So if you are ready to stop abandoning yourself and start honoring the leader you truly are, go ahead and keep listening. Your future self is waiting. Welcome to Herself, a space for women to have deep conversations about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential, so you can become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. After being in business for over 2 decades, I've learned, as you likely have too, that as you grow your business grows you in unexpected, often challenging, yet miraculous ways. Here, we'll talk about how to get out of your own way so you can grow a business that's abundant and sustainable while allowing you to be a force for good in the world. I'll give you simple, actionable strategies as well as wisdom and inspiration to help you root into your wholeness, lead from your values, and work in ways that feel deeply aligned so you can bring your true self into the world through your business and in every area of your life. A few years ago, I had a really challenging encounter with a woman who had been a longtime student, client, member of my community. And we had had an encounter actually several years or maybe even a decade prior to that, where she was repeatedly crossing boundaries, violating clear company policies that she agreed to. And it was happening again and again, to the point where I needed to approach her in the way that I often do, with compassion and curiosity, assuming positive intent. And I had multiple conversations with her, clarifying expectations. And when the behavior persisted, I realized that I needed to draw a firmer line and I needed to let her know that I could no longer work with her and that she could no longer be part of our community. And so she stepped away and some time passed. I don't remember exactly how much time passed because it was many years ago. And she came back to me very apologetic and wanting to repair and wanting to make amends. And so we went through a big process around that and continued to move forward again. And then several years ago, she was in another one of my programs, and then things seemed to be going okay, although I was so cautious about, things that had happened in the past. And then she signed up for some private work with me, and the same pattern from the past resurfaced in the private work with me. And I realized pretty quickly, okay, I let this go on for too long all those years ago. And, there's that saying from Maya Angelou: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And even though there were many wonderful qualities about our connection and her participation in the community, I just realized this is fundamentally not working for me or my business, because she's violating all of these agreements that are needed in order for me and my business to really function in integrity and efficiency. and in wholeness. And so I was really sitting with the parts that were coming up for me around this, around setting another boundary and ending our one-on-one connection and removing her from the program that she was in. So I was sitting with all of my parts. I talked it through with my business coach at the time, and I realized I just needed to draw a firm line for good and let her know that I could no longer work with her and that she could no longer be part of our longer program. And to be totally honest, it felt completely awful. My nervous system was on fire. My people pleasing parts were activated. I felt grief. I felt guilt. I felt self doubt. Am I being too harsh? She's going to tell the other people in the program, which she did, and they're going to judge me. And maybe this is going to disrupt the whole community. This is going to create a lot of challenge in the community. And still, I knew that I needed to hold the line, and that ultimately, if I didn't do that, no one was going to do that. And I needed to take care of myself and my business and ultimately the larger community. And, fast forward, some time has passed, and I'm able to see it for what it was. And I'm able to see how important it was for me to not only lay out clear client policies, program agreements in advance, also to communicate when those are being violated, first just gently as a reminder, and then with increasing firmness, and ultimately to really just stand firm in that I will not work with people in my business or in any area of my life who repeatedly cross boundaries. And that is what we are talking about today. Choosing integrity over comfort, choosing alignment over approval. And, this experience taught me something I'll never forget. Sacred boundaries aren't just about what you're saying no to. They're more about what you're actually saying yes to. You're saying yes to your energy, your safety, your capacity to do your deepest work, and the integrity of the space that you're holding for others, and holding everyone accountable to that same level of integrity. And when you lead a soul-led business, when you are self-led in your business, holding the line isn't just about logistics, it's about leadership. So let me ask you, do you find yourself saying yes when you really want to say no because you're afraid of the repercussions? Like in my instance, you're afraid of a client being angry at you. You're afraid of them telling other people what you did and what a horrible person you are, and other people having judgment about you. Or maybe you're constantly over delivering, undercharging, having clients cancel at the last minute and feeling resentful about it later because you just didn't say anything. If so, you are not alone. And there's another saying, I forget who this comes from, but we teach other people how to treat us. So when we're constantly letting other people violate our boundaries, we're teaching them that it's okay for them to do that. And when we are upholding our own boundaries, we're teaching people it's not okay to violate those. So today I'm diving into all of this because it touches so many of us, the people pleasing and the art of setting sacred boundaries in your business. But this also extends to truly every area of your life. And we'll look at these patterns through the lens of internal family systems, recognizing these people pleasing parts as protectors that are genuinely trying to keep you safe. And we'll also explore the very real costs of loose boundaries, not just the energetic drain and the burnout that come from them, but the financial impact of underpricing and over-delivering, and of course, the spiritual cost of being out of alignment with your authenticity, with your deepest truth. And more importantly, I will share practical ways to begin reframing boundaries as sacred commitments rather than as harsh limitations. And I will be sharing specific strategies to set clear expectations with students and clients, to honor your worth through aligned pricing, and protect your time so you can show up authentically. Because here's what I do know to be true. You don't need to become someone else to lead powerfully. You get to lead as your truest, as your most sovereign self. And that begins with sacred boundaries that honor who you are, honor how you operate best, and really support the vision that you are here to bring into the world. So let's start out by talking about the different ways that people pleasing shows up in our businesses. Because awareness is the first step to healing, and recognizing these patterns is the first step toward transforming them. So, over the years, I have found that there are three main archetypes of people pleasing that I see most often amongst spiritual women entrepreneurs. And chances are at least one of these will feel familiar to you. Okay, you ready? First, there is the good girl archetype. And this is the part of us that was praised and rewarded during childhood for being accommodating, for not making waves, for putting others first. I was certainly raised with that archetype, and I see this in so many of my clients who struggle to say no or set clear expectations because they've been conditioned to believe that their worth is tied to how much they can give to others and how much others approve of them. So one of my clients shared, I can't say no. I do so much for others without payment. And this perfectly captures this good girl pattern. The good girl fears that if she sets boundaries, she will be rejected and she will be labeled as selfish. Then there's the healer archetype. This shows up strongly for those of us in service-based businesses, especially in coaching and therapy and energy work, or in any transformational field. And the healer believes that true service means self-sacrifice, that to be effective in helping others, we need to give endlessly of ourselves. It's very much like being a martyr. And this is the part that might say, my business is burning me out, I give too much. The healer confuses boundaries with limitations on care, when in fact, boundaries are what make sustainable healing work possible. And finally, there is the high achiever archetype. And this is the part that says yes out of fear of being seen as difficult, replaceable, not committed enough. So the high achiever often overworks, she overcommits, she overdelivers because she has a deep fear that anything less than perfection will ultimately result in failure or abandonment. And I hear this when clients tell me, I work with my people pleaser parts every day, or burnout is the tough one. So there's a constant pressure to prove your worth through achievement and accommodating other people's needs at the expense of your own. So here is a bit of relief. From an IFS perspective, these are not character flaws. These are not weaknesses. There is nothing wrong with you. There's zero wrong with you. These are protective parts of you that developed in your lifetime and likely over many generations passed on through your female lineage, developed to keep you and to keep us as women safe, accepted, and loved. Because if we were not pleasing to others as women over the past many centuries, that could risk our very survival. So these parts are doing their best with the strategies that they learned, good strategies that they learned, because they did keep our ancestors alive. And you often learn these very, very early in life. The good girl protected you from rejection. The healer protected you from being labeled as selfish. The high achiever protected you from being seen as inadequate. They all had positive intentions. And none of their strategies are serving you any longer. So one woman that I work with just really beautifully expressed this struggle when she shared, I feel like I can't commit fully with a toddler and in the midst of being a mom. So understanding these protective parts with compassion is absolutely essential in this process. Truly, and you know this, I know this, we know this, and it's one thing to know it It's another thing to actually practice it consistently. We cannot transform what we don't acknowledge or what we shame ourselves for. These patterns, they did not develop overnight, and they will not transform overnight either. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes persistence. But bringing awareness to them is so powerful. It creates space for choice where previously there was only automatic reaction. There was just your unconscious conditioning. So I invite you to pause, take a breath with me, and notice, which of these archetypes do you most resonate with? And how do they show up in your business? More importantly, can you begin to approach these parts with curiosity rather than with judgment? Because again, when we can meet these parts with understanding, we can create the conditions for the very real change that we want, not from a place of self-criticism, but from a place of growth and integration. All right, so now I want to talk about what's really at stake when we don't set clear boundaries in our businesses. Because while people pleasing may feel safer in the moment, it does, if we're really honest with ourselves, exact a tremendous price over time. So first, there's the energetic cost. And this one, I'd say perhaps is the one that's most immediately felt, but ignored. Like we override it. When we're constantly saying yes, when what we really want to say is no, we're overextending ourselves to meet others' expectations, and we deplete our own life force. And this depletion shows up as exhaustion, as resentment, as profound disconnection from our own inner guidance. And, a lot of the women that I work with, when we first start working together, they are taking client calls at all hours and working into the evenings, even though that doesn't work for them, but it works for clients. That's the only time that they can talk. They're responding to messages on weekends. They're essentially being on all the time. And they think that they're being of service, but the truth is, when they really tune in and listen to it, they're doing so much of what they don't want to do. And again, their energy wanes, they're more disconnected from their intuition, and there is that exhaustion and resentment. So then there's the financial cost, which is very real. And it's sometimes harder to recognize because when we undercharge for our services because we're afraid to ask for more, we're afraid other people will judge us, we're afraid that people will abandon us. When we allow scope creep because we're afraid to enforce our agreements, like that case with a former client, I was just afraid that there was going to be backlash in my community, parts of me were afraid there's going to be backlash in the community, that she was going to judge me as being too harsh or heartless. When we constantly over-deliver beyond what our clients have paid for, we are essentially paying to work with our clients rather than the other way around. And that's not sustainable. I think that we all know that. And finally, there is what I consider to be the spiritual cost. When we are constantly overriding our intuition and our inner knowing in favor of pleasing others, we are falling out of alignment simultaneously with our own truth. We begin to lose trust in ourselves. Our business decisions become reactive rather than inspired. And ultimately, that misalignment creates a gap between who we truly are and how we're showing up in the world. And let's be honest, this is perhaps the greatest cost of all. The missed opportunity to create, to serve from our most authentic place, to model the very transformation that we are offering our clients, to embody the vision that called us to this work in the first place. And I see this struggle in the words of some of the women who come to work with me. They say, I work with my people-pleasing parts every day. And these aren't just personal challenges, they're symptoms of a fundamental misalignment between our deepest values and how we're structuring our businesses. So let's be honest about something else. Loose boundaries, they don't just harm us, they also ultimately harm our clients. When we are depleted, when we're resentful, disconnected from our power, we simply cannot show up with presence, with wisdom, with the energy that our clients deserve. We cannot give from an empty well. So the question for you becomes, what would be possible if you reclaimed that energy? What could you create if you were charging appropriately and delivering within clear, sustainable containers? And how much more powerfully could you serve if you were fully aligned with your truth? Because that is ultimately what's available on the other side of these boundary challenges, not just protection from burnout, expansion into your fullest expression and service. So one of the biggest shifts that has helped me to transform my own relationship with boundaries was reframing them not as hard lines of separation, but as sacred containers. Really seeing these boundaries as holy commitments that honor the most precious resource that we have, our life force energy. Because when we think of boundaries as walls or barriers, yes, they can feel rigid, they can feel unloving, even selfish. But what if instead we viewed boundaries as these acts of devotion to our vision, to our values, and to the depth of the work that we offer? And what if setting boundaries was actually a spiritual practice, one that allows us to show up more fully in service? And this reframe can really change everything. So I want to offer you 3 guiding questions that have helped me and many women that I've mentored to begin to approach boundaries from this perspective of sacred commitments. So first, ask yourself, what am I truly available for energetically, financially, and emotionally? What am I truly available for energetically, financially, and emotionally? So this question invites you to take an honest inventory of your resources rather than operating from a perspective of limitlessness, as if you can do it all, because we can't, right? The second question, where am I saying yes out of fear or obligation instead of true desire? Where am I saying yes out of fear or obligation instead of true desire? And I want to acknowledge that, this isn't black and white. And yes, there are times in life where we absolutely have to do things that we don't want to do. Whether it's something like paying taxes or, picking up my dog's poop or emptying the dishwasher. I don't want to do those things, but I do them because I have to. But you know what I mean? And there are times also in business where maybe you're feeling strapped financially and you need to take on more clients than you want to, or you need to take on clients that you aren't your dream clients that you normally wouldn't want to work with. And yes, there are absolutely times where that is needed and necessary. And ultimately, we want to be working towards more alignment so that we don't need to take on those extra things that really are not aligned with our deeper truth. So this question, where am I saying yes out of fear or obligation instead of desire? It helps us to distinguish between choices that arise from our deepest values and those choices that come from our people-pleasing and protective parts. Because often when we look more closely, we will see that many of our yeses are actually coming from fear of rejection, fear of missing out, fear of being judged, fear of not being enough. And the third question is, what boundaries would feel like a gift to my future self and to my business? What boundaries would feel like a gift to my future self and to my business? Now, this forward looking question helps us make decisions not just for immediate comfort, but for long term thriving. So, when I make boundary decisions now, I often imagine myself 3 months in the future and I ask what that future Sarah would thank me for. So, from an IFS perspective, setting healthy boundaries isn't about getting rid of our people pleasing parts, it's about updating them, helping them to evolve, and bringing them into current time. Remember, these parts developed their strategies at earlier points in our lives when we had fewer resources and less agency. And now, as adult women who are even running our own businesses, we have many, many more choices available to us. So again, this is where compassion and curiosity become so important. Rather than battling or shaming these parts of ourselves, we can engage them in conscious dialogue, saying something like, "Sweetie, I see you're afraid that if we set this boundary, we'll be rejected, we'll be seen as unloving, as difficult. And I understand why you feel that way. But we have new information and we have new resources now, and we can handle whatever comes. I am here with you through whatever comes." So also remember that resistance is a sign of growth. When we feel internal pushback against setting a limit, it's often because we're stretching into new territory. We're updating old patterns. We're creating space for something new to emerge. There's nothing wrong if you feel a backlash after sending, a backlash within you, in your own system, after setting a boundary. So remember, boundaries are not static. They are dynamic expressions of your current needs, your values, your vision. These are always evolving as you evolve, and they're evolving as your life shifts and change. But what matters ultimately is that they arise from your truth rather than from fear or conditioning. So I invite you to consider an additional question. What if your boundaries weren't limitations, but expressions of your most sacred yes? What if they weren't about pushing others away, but about creating the conditions for your most meaningful connection and contribution? Because the women who are in my programs and in my one-on-one containers or at my retreats, and ultimately are aligned with the kind of women that I want to work with because they're honoring those agreements that we both made very consciously. They often say that it helps them to feel more safe to have those agreements in place. There's a settledness that comes into their nervous systems because they know what's expected of them. Then they can make a conscious choice. Yes, this is something that I can uphold. This is something that will bring forward my best self. And this is a space within which I can feel deeply safe. And that's part of the paradox and the promise of sacred boundaries. They don't diminish your impact, they magnify it. They don't separate you from others. They allow you to show up in relationship with more presence, power, and authenticity. So let's dig a little bit deeper, if you're willing, and get more practical, because I always love to get practical. And the first step of that practicality is another question. There's lots of questions in here because this is really because I want you to be considering how this applies to your specific life and business. So what are some specific boundaries that you might consider implementing in your business? And I want to share some examples that have been transformative for me and for the women that I work with. So first, we'll talk about client expectations. I have a page on my website that is a page where I list my client policies. And anyone who works with me one-on-one, they review these client policies before we work together to make sure that they work for them. So this is an area where boundaries are absolutely essential, but they're often overlooked. Because clear containers for how and when you'll work together provide safety for both you and your clients. And you want to have these written out to spell out exactly what's included in your work together, whether that's on a web page, whether that's in a contract, whether that's in an email, the number of sessions, for example, the length of the calls, is there email support between sessions? What is the expected response times? And when I first started implementing all of these things, I worried that maybe clients would find them off-putting. But instead, like I shared earlier, they often just express relief because they appreciate knowing exactly what to expect and what they're investing in. And so one powerful boundary in this area that you can consider is, what are your office hours? So rather than being available whenever a client reaches out, you could name specific days and times that you're available for calls, for emails, for messages. This can create a much deeper sense of freedom for you. And for instance, in my week-to-week life, I batch my client calls on specific days of the week. I only message with my clients because we message together in this private Slack channel on certain days of the week. And I have a certain response time that they're aware of. And this allows me to be fully present when I'm working and fully present in my day-to-day life when I'm not. So next, let's talk about some pricing boundaries, because this is an area that many of us struggle with the most. We often undercharge because we fear that our work isn't worth more, or because we generally want to help people who may not be able to afford higher rates. And all of that is well and good to some extent, but undercharging comes with hidden costs because we all know it can lead to resentment. It can require you to take on more clients than feels sustainable for you. And it can actually diminish the transformation that your clients experience because we often value what we pay for. This doesn't mean that we want to charge exorbitant prices just to do that, just to prove that we can. But there is a level of, finding that balance of what is right exchange with this person in this particular container so that they can show up as their highest self. And so you can show up as your highest self. And that's a delicate dance and exploration. So setting clear pricing boundaries means charging in alignment with your actual expertise, the transformation you offer, and what allows your business to be sustainable. And it means being willing to have those sometimes uncomfortable money conversations. And it means trusting that the right clients will value your work appropriately. Next, there are time boundaries. And I actually believe that this is the foundation of all the other boundaries because how we use our time truly does reflect our deepest values. And one essential practice is to create non-negotiable, I call it CEO time, in your calendar. Time when you are working on your business, not just in it. And for me, examples of this is on Thursday afternoons because I don't work on Fridays. So Thursday afternoons is when I connect with my vision. I review my goals. I review the metrics from the week, money coming in, money going out, other key metrics that we're tracking. I set intentions for the next week. I review the week that has passed. And putting this in place ensures that I'm leading my business rather than just constantly responding to others' needs and requests. And I also create spacious windows for creation. I have deep work days on Mondays where I'm not available to clients, to my team, and that gives me these blocks of time to work on these deeper aspects of the business and of my vision. So I invite you to consider which of these areas feels most important for you to address right now. Where are you feeling the greatest drain or misalignment? And what is one boundary, one that I named or one that's coming forward for you right now that you could implement this week that could begin to shift that dynamic? Remember, you do not need to transform everything at once. I'm a huge fan of baby steps. Small, consistent steps toward clearer boundaries will create meaningful change incrementally over time. So now that we've gone through the practicalities, I want to guide you through a brief practice to help you to embody this, to help you to begin working with the parts of you that may be resistant to setting boundaries. And this is a simple adaptation of the IFS process that you can use anytime that you feel that inner conflict around establishing limits. So let's begin by taking a few full, deep breaths together. As you do that, just allowing your body to settle into this moment. Feeling your feet, feeling your breath, even hearing the sounds beyond my voice. And then I invite you to bring to mind a situation in your business, in your work right now, where you know you need to set a boundary, but you've been hesitant to do so. Maybe it's raising your rates, limiting your availability, or being more selective about the clients you take on. And as you hold this situation in your awareness, just notice what comes up in your body. Maybe you feel a tightness in your chest or a knot in your stomach, heaviness in your shoulders. These bodily sensations often are a doorway to the parts of you that fear setting this boundary. And with curiosity and compassion, see if you can get a sense of this part. You might perceive it as an image, a feeling, or just simply a knowing. And this is a protector that's been working so hard to keep you safe by people pleasing. You can gently ask this part, what are you afraid would happen if we set this boundary? And then listen for what comes up. Maybe it fears rejection, conflict, loss of opportunity. Maybe it believes that if you set boundaries, you'll end up alone or your business will suffer. Simply acknowledge whatever fears arise with genuine understanding. These fears make perfect sense given this part's perspective and history. Now, see if you can access some curiosity, some compassion, some calm, any quality of your self-energy. And from this place, let this part know that you hear its concerns, that you understand why it's been working so hard to protect you, that you appreciate its intentions even if its strategies have now become limiting. And you might try asking this part if it would be willing to step back just a little so you can approach this boundary situation from a more centered place, not pushing it away, but inviting its cooperation so together you can explore a new possibility. And then notice how it responds. There might be some relief, some hesitation, both. Whatever arises is perfectly okay. And if this part is giving you its permission, imagine setting this boundary from a place of self-leadership. See yourself communicating clearly and compassionately. Feel the groundedness in your body as you honor your truth. Notice the spaciousness that opens up when you no longer abandon yourself to please others. And take a moment to absorb this felt sense of boundary setting as an act of self-care rather than selfishness, as an expression of wholeness rather than limitation. And when you're ready, gently bring your awareness back to the space that you're in, knowing that you can return to this practice whenever you're facing a boundary challenge in your business or in your life. This simple connection with your protective parts can transform how you approach boundaries, not as something you force yourself to do despite inner resistance, but as an integrated choice that honors all parts of you. As we come to the end of our exploration for today, I want to leave you with this truth that has become a guiding light for me. You don't need to become someone else to lead powerfully in your business. You get to lead as your truest, most sovereign self, which is unique for each of us. I also want to remind you of something really important. Setting boundaries is really uncomfortable. You can expect that. And it's completely okay to feel that discomfort. Because here's the thing, we often avoid setting boundaries precisely because we do not want to feel that discomfort. We don't want to feel the guilt, the self-doubt. We don't want to review over and over obsessively how things went, wondering if we did it right, feeling the fear of being judged or disliked. I get it. I feel that too whenever I set an edgy boundary. So know that there is absolutely nothing wrong if these feelings arise. In fact, they're actually a good sign that you've set a boundary that you haven't set in the past. And remember, for many centuries, it was life-threatening for us as women to set boundaries and to be disliked, to be seen as disagreeable. So no wonder we have so many strong protective parts that come up around this. And you do not need to be ruled by these parts any longer. You can be their good parent. You can be self-led with them. You can hear them. You can see them. You can be with them. You can let them know that they're safe now. This is the practice of boundary setting from wholeness rather than from fear. So this journey of setting sacred boundaries is not about becoming harder, colder, more distant. It's about becoming more authentic, more present, and ultimately more generous with what you truly have to give. It's about creating the conditions for your gifts to flow freely without the distortion of resentment or depletion. And I have watched countless women transform their businesses and their lives through this practice of sacred boundary setting. And I've done it myself. I've seen them raise their rates, attract more aligned clients, reduce their working hours, increase their impact. And I've celebrated with them as they found the courage to say no to what drains them so they can say a wholehearted yes to what truly lights them up. And this transformation is available to you too. It begins with recognizing the patterns of people pleasing that may be running you, understanding the real costs of loose boundaries, reframing boundaries as sacred containers for your energy and your genius, and implementing practical changes that honor your self-worth and your deep wisdom. So as we close, I'd like to invite you to take that one small step, one baby step, remember, bit by bit, slowly over time, toward more empowered boundaries this week. And here's a journal prompt to help you begin. You can bring this prompt with you on a walk, bring it to your journal. What boundary would change everything for you if you'd honored it this week? What boundary would change everything for you if you honored it this week? Write about it. Feel into the shifts it would create. Notice the resistance that arises. Then choose one small concrete action you can take to begin establishing this boundary. And I want to add another step of accountability. DM me on Instagram at Sarah Von Stover. Let me know the boundary that you are implementing. I will help to just hold that in my heart for you. I am the one in my Instagram account. I read the messages that come in, and I would love to serve as an accountability buddy for you and to just really hold in my heart the vision of you honoring that sacred commitment. Because remember, like any spiritual practice, setting boundaries is just that. It is a practice. You will not do it perfectly. There will be times when your people-pleasing parts step back in. That is okay. When that happens, meet yourself with compassion, reset, and begin again. And the path to more sustainable, aligned, and impactful business, it is not linear. It is a spiral of growth, of integration, of refinement. And each boundary you set creates more space for your true self to emerge and to lead. Thank you for joining me today for this important conversation. I would love to hear what resonated for you. And again, the boundary that you are committed to honoring moving forward. And again, you can DM me on Instagram at Sarah Von Stover. I will read and respond to everyone that comes in. Until next time, may you lead from your wholeness. May you honor your sacred boundaries and create a business and body of work that truly reflects the brilliance of who you are. Thank you for joining me today. And remember, change doesn't come from listening alone. I invite you to commit to taking one small or large courageous action after today's conversation. One step you can take, if you haven't already, is to sign up for my Sunday journal. It's a weekly newsletter filled with inspiration and reflections about the intersection between spiritual entrepreneurship and fulfilling your potential to help you become the woman you truly are in every area of your life. You can subscribe at programs-sarahvonstover.com/journal. And if you found this podcast valuable, please share it with the women in your world. Also, I'd be very grateful if you'd leave a review. It helps others find resources like this, and I'd love to hear what's coming alive for you after listening today. Above all, keep going, and never forget the unique offerings you and your true self bring to the world. Until next time, I'm sending you my heartfelt support.